Did you ever have those traditions on Halloween to watch a show that despite being for kids it scares you? Japan had Poppy the Performer, America and Canada had Goosebumps, but what about the UK, my home country? Well, for us, we had... No, not you. No! Let's go back to 2000. Thank you! Grizzly Tales was a book series created by James Ricks, who created the book series from the 1990s. He would even narrate the books on YouTube. CITV would have it for its run and have stop motion made by Elan Animation, a company that even made the pilot for Bob the Builder. I'm serious! The claymation would be done by Andy Farago, Richard Randolph, and Nick Herbert. 3 excellent experts. And the 2D animation for the stories are represented by Honeycomb Animation, the same company that made Wolves, Witches and Giants, and Funky Valley. Funky Valley! This! Funky Valley! This! The format is straightforward. Uncle Grizzly and Spindleshanks would do some comedy while introducing the story, sometimes not saying the title. And then the story begins with a child or a group of children as the focus. However, not all of the kids in the stories are bad. For example, in The Grass Monkey, the main protagonist is Spike, a gentle soul who lived with his poorly mother and Ruby the cow. While in the story he does steal, but that's because of the pressure of the antagonist and true bad child, Esmeralda, a blonde bratty girl who'll even make Evelyn blush. After the child is given karma, sometimes death, the story ends with Uncle Grizzly and Spindleshanks once more, and sometimes Uncle Grizzly will laugh at the end. His laugh gives me chills every time. Speaking of which, let's go over some of the stories that didn't become episodes, and I'll have my own theories as to why. The Black Knight. During a war to gain the throne of the kingdom, Egor tried to take over but was banished by King Basil. This story is very interesting, and I think the reason it didn't become an episode was because of the theming, and it had a darker theme. Plus the themes of cliches of the Black Knight were very cliche, and are still cliche to this day. The Well. Mr. and Mrs. Haley lived in a nice cottage, but also had an over 1,000-year-old well in their garden, and their grandkids visited. However, the well is dangerous. I feel like this episode really didn't have much of a bad child, and I was feeling bad for Mr. Haley. Also, the well would have been very horrifying to have. The Matchstick Girl. This was about an 8-year-old daughter and her siblings. One of my favourites is the one-tailed, 2-footed, 3-bellied, 4-headed, 5-fingered, 6-chinned, 7-winged, 8-eyed, 9-nosed, 10-toothed monster. I think the concept is pretty hilarious, but I feel like if this became an episode, poor Nigel would have passed out from what might have been the longest title of a tale ever. Now, like I said, and most of the stories have the child be taught a lesson in a gruesome way. Luckily, not all of them die, so you don't get too horrified. For one example is Little Fingers, where a boy named Daffod, God, his parents were teasing him with that name, where he gets his devilish fingers removed and he now has little dubs. Tag is another example. If anything, Terry got one of the more happier endings, as he would stop stealing and become a much nicer kid. But it still has some of the twist in the ending depending on the story. However, Grizzly Tales would still have its problems once Nickelodeon began series 7 and 8, replacing Grizzly and Spindleshanks with Nightwater, who's decent, but I'll take Uncle Grizzly any day. However, there are still some stories I liked, like Nails in Her Coffin and The Little Flower Girl. There are some stories I wish from the 2 seasons we got in season 1 to 4, heck, even season 5 and 6. Because even if the animation took a little dip, it still had some of the charm, even if it meant sacrificing the stop motion. Grizzly Tales is still one of my favourite scary shows growing up, and a worthy exception as I'm not really one when it comes to most horror media. If it weren't for this show, I would have been very timid to go near stuff like Goosebumps, Indigo Park, and more. So, thank you Grizzly Tales, and happy 25 years.